Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about blind obedience. I just came back from the car wash, okay? Had to get some new tires in my car. It's one of these car washes where you drive through, it's nice, soft, automated car wash on your car, and then you pull through and you can pull in these stalls and you get to vacuum and rub down your car, do whatever you got to do. And I'm backing out because I'm done. And I have to wait for this woman to back out before me. And she gets in front of me down the alleyway to exit this whole thing. Now, she's been rubbing down her car longer than me. She was there when I got there, and she left just as I left. I look up, and she still has the blue tape on the back of her car. And I'm thinking, wow. For whatever reason, that blue tape is an authoritative procedure to washing a car, and for whatever reason, she doesn't think she can take it off. But she totally rubbed down the outside of her car and stared at that blue tape over and over. Blind obedience. How many times you've been in a public place, there's a double door, and there's a lot of people going through, but only one half of the door is actually open. And so it starts bottlenecking. People trying to come out and go in through the same half door that's open. And then you walk up and you take one split second to examine the situation. You realize that the other half of the door is unlocked. And you just reach up and open it and walk right through. But the sheep and the cattle that has become our society, who doesn't think, and it's blind obedience. There's only one door open, therefore we must all go through this door. No one thinks about the mechanics and engineering of how a door works. Westworld Season 2, I think Episode 1, there's a scene where a gentleman describes elephants that are as big as, large trucks being held down by a little spike in the ground. And he tells a story about how he asked his father, how on earth, or why on earth, does that elephant not pull the spike out? I mean, here they can uproot trees, they can turn cars over. Why doesn't he pull the spike out and just run away? And his father tells him, well, because when they were babies, they used the spike to hold them in place. And they just simply learned that once the rope is in the ground, you can't defeat the spike, because as a child elephant, they can't. It becomes learned in their brain, and then it becomes a rule of blind obedience. This phenomenon is interesting because you can see it in the public and scoff just like I just did, and just like, Jesus, people, open the fucking door, would you? I'm sitting here waiting in line because you guys are all morons. A door, really? There's two sides to it. Just open up the other side. You see this all the time. In malls, in baseball stadiums, in subways. I mean, it is unbelievable. The millions of people who walk through one half of a door. Because everybody who does it automatically flunks the test, right? You walk through one half of the door and you're like, so you didn't see the other half? I guess if there's plenty of room, you don't need to. But if everyone's bottlenecked and waiting and time is money and life is precious, you failed the test. But when you see this kind of thing in other people, at some point you should be asking yourself, holy shit, do I do that? Right? If you see someone snore, it's a very interesting thing. You have no idea if you snore unless someone you sleep with tells you, man, you snore. And you're like, really? And you wake up in the morning and there's no recollection of it necessarily. That's a little different. Blind obedience is when you're awake and you can notice it. If we lived in an absolutely perfect world where no one lied and no one did any harm to anyone, blind obedience probably wouldn't be such a big deal. But we don't. We live in a constant 4D chess game with the bad guys. And unfortunately, they know all the rules. They have all the pieces. Because they've been taught how to play this game, and we haven't been taught how to play the game. So we're trying to be the muddy rogue who figures it out. Every casino in Vegas is rigged to take your money. It's mathematically rigged to take your money. But poker is a very interesting vulnerability to a casino. And poker players know this. If you go play craps, you're going to lose. More often than not, play roulette, blackjack, anything, you're going to lose. You pull a one-arm bandit today, you're just cascading through a microchip with all of the wins and loses already calculated. It's all predetermined. But you walk in with poker against the house, and now it's all up to your head. And you can actually beat the house. Now, the house works really, really hard to train their house players. And there's all these video cameras on the table to detect something they call counting cards, right? What's really funny is they're punishing you for being extremely observant, smart, and using your memory with your intelligence to play the game better than anyone else. And there's just this threshold of being so good at it that you can get your ass killed. I used to have a friend, Electronic Arts. He would go on a routine basis, about every 6 months. He knew the pit boss, and he'd look at him, and they'd wink, and they'd go, "Okay, I'm going to take you for so much, and then I'm going to stop, but I'm just going to keep looking at you to figure out when I have outworn my welcome or, I fulfilled this particular session." Meanwhile, the house makes money off of pretty much anyone who loses, so the guy's beating the shit out of everybody else. So the house is making a little bit of money. They comp his room, they comp his meals. He stays for 3 days. He binge plays, 10, 12 hours in a row. Then he goes and sleeps for 8 hours and then comes back in and repeats the process. It's interesting. Life is a lot like that. Poker player. The casino is very much like the banking organizations, the corporations, and the government and military that follow all the above. But the casino is the control apparatus. They're the clean, polished, we have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to fuck you organization. And you're the poker player who just simply walked off the street with the capability in your brain to play poker really well. And again, if you mess with their money too much, they kill you, right? And what's strange is the Vegas police know that that's what happens. It's not illegal to play poker really well. It's just, it's all kind of the wild, wild west out there in Nevada. Cops will just tell you, don't do that. Move on, man. Once you get really good at one casino, they finger you at all the other casinos. It's interesting. And I'm not a poker player, and I'm not a gambler. I think it's a foolish way to waste money, and I'm not good enough at poker to make that worth my while. But I think it's an interesting analogy. Once you understand that, you understand us, those who are not following blind obedience. I want to make this episode because I want to highlight and heighten your awareness of things that you accept, regardless of their logic or benefit to you. Because I allude to things, and I'll actually be very specific about things in episodes, but I haven't put it all in one big giant bucket. One of the things I constantly tell you guys is that debt to illegal Ponzi scheme banks is illegal debt, and therefore any national debt that we have to some group of banking families across the pond into Europe, well, that's ill-gotten gains. It's illegal, and we can't honor that. We have no national debt to anyone. banks that use fractional reserve banking to convince you in a court of law that you have been loaned the money for your house when they never had the money for your house. And the only thing going on here is that you become a slave in the system and actually give the bank the money that they were allowed to say that they could vouch for due to fractional reserve banking. Now, if you borrow $50 from your buddy, that's real labor. That's real money. I don't give a shit if that guy is worth $1 billion because he sold some startup a long time ago. That's his or her money. You owe them that money back. If you agree to pay interest, well, then you agree to pay an interest. Be integral, pay it back. I no longer allow the conversation just to come and go around me about national debt. Either be it for Europe or us. I won't acknowledge either one. So someone says, oh, Europe's $20 trillion in debt. I just say, no, they're not. They are not $20 trillion in debt. It was all fake to begin with. But again, someone in France borrows $50, 50 franc, used to be, right, euros now, from their neighbor, then they owe that money. We must break off this blind obedience because it is perpetuating, okay, the paradigms that keep those who have created the paradigm in power. Bankers. I mean, just think about it. Just think about it for 1 second. You're some Rothschild and there's sort of kind of a noob family member coming in, young person taking over, and they've kind of kept the kid outside the envelope of how it really works until that day, and that person comes in, that family member comes in, talks to Daddy Rothschild and says, but Daddy, if it's all fake, how are we going to stay in control? And he just looks down, a big shit-eating grin with his crappy British teeth, and he just says, they're too goddamn stupid to know. Imagine that for a second. They're talking about you. You know it's not you specifically on this show, but you know how it works. What if there's something you're not catching? Then it is you. It is me. And they actually have a conversation about something that you have duped yourself with to be controlled, to be a serf, to lose your sovereignty, to be a slave, right? And they're talking about you and your family and your friends and your country, and they just say, they're as dumb as a bag of hammers. They just keep putting themselves right back in our system. And then the young kid goes, why? Why don't they see it? And he says, that's just how nature works. The elephant won't pull up the spike. And neither will they, because they have blind obedience. And the kid goes, wow. And the dad goes, yeah, isn't it awesome? We get to have everything that life has to offer, period, including eating children. And they won't look at us. They don't have the mental capacity to conceive of the crimes that we commit because somebody can't be put out to think a negative thought. The more we do horrible things, the more the whatever citizen, they fight among themselves, right? I was thinking about it today that someone's promoting net neutrality online again, and I'm like, God damn it. The Patriot Act wasn't a fucking act of patriotism, right? Every time there's some bullshit movement like that, you take the name, you invert it, then you listen to it, and you're like, oh, it's completely fucked. And you're like, yeah. Why would they call it net neutrality? Because it's exactly opposite of that, right? But now I was thinking, they always convince us to kill each other, right? Every war is a bunch of bullshit. Every war is bullshit. All the laws we passed the Patriot Act, we passed the Military Commissions Act, which gets rid of the Fourth fucking Amendment of our Constitution. It's not lawful, it's not constitutional, it's illegal, but that's what's going on, right? Okay. Then how do you kill ants? What are one of the coolest ways to kill ants? You get some sugar water, And there's various acids you can put in there. It's usually a 0.5% acid. And you lay it out wherever ants are, and they trough to it. You put it in little dotted lines, and they all trough to it and eat it and take it back to the queen. And eventually they feed the entire brood so much acid, it eats their digestive systems, it kills the queen, and you never see them again. They die somewhere, wherever they are. And they turn into dust, and you vacuum them up at some point. But isn't it interesting that one of the neatest ways to kill an insect is to convince it to kill itself, and to kill all of its neighbors, and to kill the mother who gave birth to them? Interesting. Well, we are those ants. Right? It used to be hard to find a black person in the 90s to see, who was born into that era, the destruction of gangs and drugs. People like Eazy-E woke up and said, I don't know any black guys in the ghetto with passports. It's a beautiful phrase to say, all this cocaine's coming from South America, all this heroin's coming from the Middle East, and we don't travel there. So do the math. It's being brought in by the CIA. It's being brought in so that we have the opportunity to create millions of dollars selling this stuff to each other, but primarily the white men. And we fight over our territory. We kill each other. We've got these two gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, and we're convinced to kill each other in addition to all the other turf wars. So you could have blood on blood crime because of someone fighting over a corner. Then you could have territorial battles between. It's just crazy. But today, it's not hard at all to find someone from the black community to do a video and say, yeah, that was a stupid era in the history of our people. White people do it much bigger, right? White people go, instead of just little ghettos and destroying the neighborhoods, we destroy countries, right? We pit gigantic religious paradigms after each other. You know, where a ghetto might kill tens of thousands, white people kill tens of millions, right? So do other nations and other races, but we're pretty good at it. All of that is blind obedience. Here's a paradigm, and follow it, because, boy, I'm telling you that you're superior if you follow this paradigm, and you can also damn everyone to hell, which makes you even fucking feel better about yourself, right? And, eventually we're going to kill everyone else. I think every religion sort of has this subtextual theme to it, which is, well, we'll convert everyone up to Judgment Day, and then Jesus and the angels will come down and kill everybody else. And not only kill them, take them to hell for the rest of their fucking existence. Is that unbelievable? Who would want to be a part of something so goddamn horrible? Yet everyone who dies goes to a wonderful place. That's what they report. Now, one thing I'm not saying in this episode is to be some sort of rebel for the sake of being a rebel, to constantly go against everything that's ever worked out in society, right? That's stupid. There's a reason why I tell you that I don't believe Jesus Christ ever existed. However, I tell you that if you want an archetype of a wonderful being, I know no other story that documents it better than the fictional tale, I believe, of Jesus Christ. I'm sure there are, Buddha was pretty cool, but goddamn, he talked a lot, didn't he? Right? The amount of information you have to read to be a Buddhist, it's a volume of his teachings. It's a book. If you go to Hawaii, you can get a Bible and a Buddhist book, Buddhist Bible, whatever, in your hotel. It's pretty cool. That's where I got mine. But Christ, if you just read the red writing, and those old Bibles that do that, where Jesus' words are red and everyone else's words are black, it is the most abridged version of perfection you'll ever find. I do think that Turn the Other Cheek was written by a Rothschild / a Flavius descendant. That's to ensure that you can always get your ass kicked, that you'll always be controllable. So we have to find methods to exist that do no harm. Now, for the lady with the sticker on her car, or the tape on the back of her windshield wiper driving out of the car wash, that's just an indicator of her docileness to reality, right? It's not hurting anybody. It keeps that part of her car dirty the whole time, which is why I never let them put that shit on my car. But my concern is that when you see that tape, it's a larger indicator to everything else. If you can't see a big blue piece of tape on your car and understand that that was merely put there temporarily to keep your windshield wiper from getting yanked off by the automated car wash system, then what else do you not pay attention to? It's really important. It's actually a little complex, like money and slavery of all kinds, right? You know that if you have awakened, which means you're watching this show, you have thrown off the veil of repression, of someone telling you how to think, and now you're making thoughts of your own volition. You're coming to conclusions based on your own desires. Hopefully you have a moral fiber that simply says, I can either choose to do this or not do this. Let's measure either one to see if it's harming anyone. And if it does, we pull out and see if we can find a different way to do it without bothering anyone. Perhaps operating completely in stealth so no one even knows you're there. And you get what you need, or we get what you want. By the way, there's some trash collection going on in the house next door. This house, I think I told you in one episode, it was rented by a family that destroyed the home. And it has been, 8 months of them repairing this place. It's just crazy. Now, there's a flip side to the equation that we have to be careful about as well, which I want to illustrate. And I've done several episodes, and I get in my house, and I'm like, damn it, you need to talk about this other half of the thing, which is the following. Let's say that the entire world woke up to conspiracies, and everyone who's ever known anything about a conspiracy reveals what they know. And instead of having just anthropologists and archaeologists, we have folks that are conspiracyologists. They go and find all the history, every nook and cranny of conspiracy that has ever existed on planet Earth. From gigantic 9/11 inside jobs to someone embezzling $50 out of the cash register in a cafeteria in Omaha, Nebraska. It becomes an art. It becomes something that gets funded with grants. And the entire initiative is to archive and document archetypes of conspiracies such that each area of the world, no matter how detailed or what have you, is analyzed against this database of conspiracies. So if we want to, say, start a new business of a particular type, they go into the database and they find every single conspiracy that has ever been related to the roles that would make this business occur, from how the investors work to how the accounting people work, how products are purchased from manufacturers and put on display, how the pricing works, how the marketing works. I mean, imagine that. That could be a movement. But at some point, it all has to settle down, right? Because we cannot survive a world where we are constantly being suspicious of everyone. It would have to be a ubiquitous thing that's built into society. Well, okay, let's run it through the, maybe we call it something benign, like a validation process. Let's call it the cleaning process. It's just, if you want to participate in this, you get locked into a system that has all the checks and balances. Mark my words, okay? Everybody wants their life to be private. But so much of our life is on the internet now that the NSA, through router duplication, they grab everything that you do on the net and they decrypt it and they save it in a database. And it just sits there doing nothing. It's aggregated for other kind of global consciousness indicators, but they don't necessarily worry about Joe the plumber specifically. And so that makes everyone uneasy. This is how Britain got control over all of their subjects and, under the monarchy over there. And so now the bankers are in charge, and so the bankers want all the control. But now they're fighting the military-industrial complex, which is fascinating. But now what if we all agree, and I'm not sure we'll all agree on this, okay? I'm not even sure what my own opinion is of this. let's say, look, because the bankers have invested so much in educating the creation of terrorists, we're talking financial terrorists that don't have guns, down to ISIS guys with, 95 IQs. They're just stupid and violent, and they run around fucking killing everybody based on some bullshit religion they've been sold, right? So the whole spectrum. We say, okay, we need to keep society really safe from craziness, and we need to know when someone is going that route. They're investigating pipe bombs online, and it's some 14-year-old kid, and it's coming up on 4th of July here in America, which means the access to gunpowder is going to go way through the roof. Or we know his father buys a lot of black powder for his old Civil War gun, and this kid's probably going to buy some metal pipes now and experiment because he likes to see things go boom. But of course, he's a 14-year-old kid, doesn't know jack shit. We look at his academia, and he doesn't have any physics, so he's probably, again, stupid, and he's going to kill himself or kill his buddies or destroy something or become some fucking Austin, package bomber. This is where we get into all that crime prediction stuff. The Minority Report thing, which is here already, right? They're trying to launch these systems. You better believe that just like the fake Tylenol cyanide deaths in the early 80s here in the United States, like 2 or 3 people die of supposedly cyanide being laced inside some Tylenol capsule. Okay. By the way, I always find it fascinating that they kill all these prisoners on death row through all these horrible chemical injections, but supposedly you could just take a cyanide pill and die. So why are you fucking electrocuting people? Why are you sticking them full of fucking Drano and frying their brains for 3 or 4 hours? Just give them a goddamn cyanide pill. If this shit's so easy, the Iceman said he used to use cyanide spray on hamburgers to kill people. So why the fuck are we torturing people? Here, take your pill. Say goodbye. Right? Crazy. But as soon as the cyanide, hey, it's pretty cool. The Tylenol pill, cyanide thing, we're going to abbreviate it cyanide. As soon as that happened, all these manufacturers were completely ready to insulate bottles. All the double packaging was already thought up. So it would seem just like DuPont demonizing Freon because they had the Freon replacement. It's all a setup, right? But this predictive thing about crime is one of these things that I think most of you know. It's going to be turned over to an initiative or an artificial intelligence, just a program, is going to monitor everything in the world, and we're going to sanction it because at least Jim Bob won't be whacking off to your wife and you having sex because you happen to have a television in your bedroom that has a camera that can be turned on at any one point in time. We're turning it over to a Deep Thoughts computer. See Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Who's going to do all the work for us. It's impartial. It doesn't get turned on by anything. You send a nudie pic to your wife or your girlfriend. It doesn't care. It knows you did it because it knows how to parse a photograph and see the geometry of what's in there, but it doesn't care. Second, that photograph goes to a 15-year-old girl and you're Anthony Weiner. Second, you're Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin doing things to kids. It can flag all kinds of wild shit, right? So we will probably get to a point, if we don't go back to the Stone Ages, where an AI will most likely babysit the world. But why does that have to happen? Why does anything like that have to happen? Because right now we're headed right towards it. Okay, this crime prediction shit's debuting all over Europe. Believe me, it's going to debut all over South America, all over Africa, India, probably China, and we'll just get compressed, into doing it ourselves. Everybody's doing it, right? I'm going to submit here that one of the reasons why this is occurring is that we are being too much of a sheep. We're not owning what we need to own because we're so fucking preoccupied with Karate Kid on Netflix, right? We're preoccupied with distracting ourselves from reality. Now, In all defense, we should have things that we can enjoy. But I think that, it's one of these things of you have to enlist for a little while and protect your country. This is a metaphor. And then you do your tour and you pop out of your tour and you can go to Disneyland or Disney World with your family for an off tour. And then you have to go back to tour. Let's say it's 3 years a pop. So you enlist, you get trained, you do 3 years. Then you do 3 years out. Then you enlist again, get retrained as to the new tactics that have happened in the last 3 years, and you go out and protect again. It's like a volunteer fire squad, right? That's the way it used to be. But no one wants to be disturbed in this world, right? When jury duty comes around, what happens? Well, some of us have time to go to jury duty. Our employers are okay with it. And of course, anyone gets on a multi-month murder trial, that's going to be difficult for anyone. But some of you can't. You have hardships. You need to go to work. You can't miss any days of work because then you can't pay your bills. Yeah, there'll be exceptions. But the beautiful thing about waking up is it really is a process of learning where we are blind and obedient, finding out the lunacy of those formulas in certain areas, okay? There are things that you need to do to stay civilized in the world. And I'm not talking about those things, right? But the beautiful thing is that it's actually happening right now due to things like YouTube. We're able to compare notes like never before. There's this, the conspiracy of the Mandela effect, which says that history changes because history is organic. And all I can say is, if it's truly true, okay, I just saw another video where Mark Hamill was asked to say, "Luke, I'm your father," which is phenomenal, right? That means that this reality is completely our imagination. That's what it means. History is only there because we remember it to be there as a groupthink thing. What's really fascinating about this, and this is going to kind of, wind around the actual charter of this episode, which is blind obedience, but what I want you to think about is the historical indicators of this is true history or this is false history based on blind obedience. One of the areas of blind obedience that is extremely frustrating, and Graham Hancock is probably at the tip of the spear for being frustrated about this, is the ancient history of Egypt. And there's a bunch of people that have rediscovered this. And they're discovering now that the Aztec pyramids in South America and the pre-Inca structures are just like the pyramids in Egypt in that they are built to be conductive batteries, okay? But they've got all the years messed up. They have this fake history, right? We have Moses as a fake character in the Christian Bible, right? Well, there's his Menes, M-E-N-E-S, excuse me. He is their savior. He's the one that united North and South Egypt, which is the opposite polarity to our North and South back in the day. And they say it all happened about 3200 BC, and then there's just about 3,000 years of building all this crap in Egypt. All based on hocus pocus horseshit. Because once we started looking at their dates and their pharaohs in temples, it goes back nearly 40,000 years on a wall. Just go look up Graham Hancock. And Graham has written 2 books. He's written a book about the Sphinx, and then he wrote a book called The Fingerprints of the Gods. He has evolved his theory exponentially since he wrote those books. So in those books, he's very speculative, but very forceful in that these dates have to be wrong. And since he wrote those books, he has actually found the temples and found the areas that prove his hunch was correct. But he's just one of many folks that have figured out that all of our history is complete bunk. But what has happened in the last 300 years that has led to a blind obedience belief of history? We relied on people to tell the truth. But because archaeologists and anthropologists have to get their money from institutions, they have to produce tangible results before they get their loans, and that's when they lie to get the results, right? Go look up the bones of Lucy. Lucy is an ape, okay? She is not a Homo sapien. But when they laid out her bones in the box, they screwed with all the dimensions and all the placement of her rib cage or shoulders to hide the fact that she was a fucking gorilla. Okay? So the beautiful thing is that if you thought everything was done in this world, which then extinguished your personal interest in those things, I'm telling you, you've been lied to about nearly everything, and all of it's open for reinterpretation. Do you want to go to the moon? Well, if you believe we went, you probably don't give a shit about going to the moon again. I mean, it's not like you would deny a ticket, but it's not a frontier. But I'm telling you, it's a frontier. It's never been touched, ever. Not with at least outward claims of having gone. If someone has an anti-gravity vehicle and they've gone up there, we don't know about that, okay? Ancient history. At least YouTube has finally brought together individuals who are finally saying pre-Inca. But when I was a kid, they just said Inca. Well, you go down and ask the Incas who built these walls out of these gigantic stones. Stones that are too massive to pick up with modern-day cranes. You'd have to take two cranes, hitch them together, and then pick this thing up. One of the stones. And these stones are like thousands, 3,000 miles away. Like it's in Peru, but the stones come from Brazil. That's the closest place we can find these stones. It's like dragging a gigantic stone that weighs more than your house times 2, 3,000 miles so you can put it in a wall. Unreal, right? There's nothing alien about them, really. You think aliens would have a lot more precision than this. But someone built them. They weren't Incas. It's whatever was before. As if there was a absolutely brilliant society. And the funny thing is that true history erases this notion of ice ages devouring the world every 30,000 years or whatever the hell the bullshit story is. That's simply to give you a mechanism in your brain as to why history seems to end. Because the modern European archaeologist, anthropologist, wants to make you believe that, they invented everything, they discovered everything. But it's not true. I was watching some bizarre video on YouTube where a guy was looking at, he was revealing a bunch of interesting facts about architecture all over the world and how massive these architectural accomplishments were. A lot of the plateaus or / podiums that, the Greek, Athens, Parthenon structures are built on, the foundations keep getting more ancient and more ancient to the point where they think that some of the podiums that they built these things on, which is another word for the foundation, is over 80,000 years old. But then he says, could this be where aliens landed? He just said that at the end of every single archaeological thing where nothing remotely, was going towards this alien thing, right? Just ridiculous. But the interesting thing was when he was in he was in Rome. I think he was in Rome. But he says, in this area, we are looking at ancient Rome and ancient Greek architecture. His brain stops at Greece, even though everything you're looking at is an Egyptian temple. It actually goes back to Egypt. But he just cuts it off in his brain because he's got a blind obedience to where the architecture came from, not realizing that all column-based stone architecture / marble architecture in Rome and Greece was stolen from the Egyptians. But that just cuts off your brain from following the rabbit hole where it needs to go, right? I'm going to mention David Icke now, because you talk about a guy that doesn't, and I don't agree with a lot of his political views today. I don't even know how much I disagree with him, honestly. But the one thing that he has as a quality to his character is that he suffers 0% from blind obedience. 0%. For all I know, he's right about everything. But he has traveled the world, and he has just simply said, what if all the stories we've heard about our past are actually true instead of allegorical or metaphorical? Okay? He opened my mind by finding interesting conspiracies, and of course, he's the reptilian guy. he did discover something that I've never heard Joseph Campbell discover, which is that every culture that's ever reached any level of distinguished notoriety in world history seems to worship some sort of serpent, either a snake or a dragon or a lizard. Remember, the Egyptians always had a cobra right over the third eye, right? The serpent was their advisor as something would come through. And they've got all these hieroglyphs of beams coming from space, hitting the capstone of a pyramid, the perimeridian stone of a pyramid, and shooting into the third eye through the serpent, through the cobra, into their mind, as if they're getting programmed from space through a reptilian interface. That's fact, man. But one of the things I've mentioned on the show a couple times is that the Egyptians had the artistic ability to render anything they could conceive of, and they had the ability to render it at a level of accuracy that is still puzzling everyone today who would participate in creating something like a big giant face that's like the face of Bode, right? It's like a 12-foot square face, and it's perfectly symmetrical left and right. It's all based on pi, like every single thing is a circle. It's three-dimensionally perfect. We can't figure out how they made it. Sure as hell wasn't just hitting it with a stone. You'd fuck it up. You would. You'd take a little bit too much off the cheekbone over here and it wouldn't be perfectly level. But we've hit this thing with lasers now, like that face scanning shit that's in your iPhone. And it's perfect. We've taken it into Photoshop and feathered left onto right and then blended that with the original image, and we can't find any mistakes on some of this stuff, right? Look at the bust of King Tut. You mean to tell me they couldn't get it right if they wanted to? It's perfect. It's a gold mask of what we all believe is someone called King Tut. Okay, keep that in your brain for 1 second here, or a little bit more than a second. Keep it in for a minute, all right? What else did the Egyptians render in all of their hieroglyphs? Anubis, Set, Ra, Anut. All of these beings that either had, most of them have some sort of animal head and a human body. An anteater, a hawk, right? A jackal. Do we think that they couldn't draw what they saw? Why would they create all these animal humans in their architecture? Why would they do that if it didn't have some validity? Well, then what if it did? What if they weren't screwing around? What if, for some reason, the gods, as they would call them, those from another realm, could be this dimension, could be another dimension, whatever. What if they're like that? And they're the ones that kick-started the entire planet, because we seem to find that the archaeology and the anthropological studies in those areas go back further and further. The more they dig, the more they find stuff that precedes the last stuff, that precedes the stuff before that. We see the utter formation of language in Egypt, from everything being an icon, right? Picture, 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 to phonetic alphabets, the way we speak today, using syllables to make words, right? Blind obedience is everywhere. It's infected our consciousness. As a child, as I always say, a child has to, what I believe is they're coming out of their spiritual realm from their previous location, they're surrendering their soul knowledge to the body's five-sense system so they can develop a consciousness, so they can essentially be with us. And that's how you have to do it as a child. So at one point, it rewards us with the mechanism. But no one teaches you when you're 5, 6, 7, 8 to hold back. Okay, now you're here, right? Yeah. Okay. From this point forward, I want you to measure everything that comes through your brain. I want you to continue thinking. I want you to solve problems. Puzzle yourself every once in a while. Build a puzzle. Solve what used to be called Dell Logic problems. I don't even know if they make those books anymore, but some people get, crossword puzzle things. They get those, word finder games, Sudoku, or Sudoku, sorry. And they solve little math equations. Those are all good for your brain. But the Dell logic problems were these other books, and they would give you a grid of eventualities, and you were supposed to solve for everything that the quiz would have. And they would say something like, well, this is about a bridge game, and, you know, Mary is Joe's husband, and she plays bridge 2 times a day, or 2 times a week, but never on Wednesdays. And then Mary comes in, she plays every single day except for Fridays. And they keep telling you this story. It's a paragraph story up above. And when it's all over, you'll know every single day that they play bridge, and you'll know who's married to who's friends with who, whatever they want to put inside the equation. It's so much fun. I used to do these as a kid in my teens and talk about energizing your brain to think. Screw algebra, which you'll never fucking use in your entire lifetime, right? Algebra is there to teach you how to think. But there are much better ways, much more interesting ways to get you to think. We could take a kid who has mastered algebra, okay? They take every, algebra 22, and I can take the same amount of time, or half the amount of time, let's go for this, half the amount of time, and keep a whole class of students in Dell logic problem books. And when it comes to life and thinking, they will smoke these algebra kids 10-1. And they'll just walk around the world living in complete lucidity. It'll be very difficult for anyone to pull a scam on them because they just see through it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You say you're rich. Well, how come I haven't seen you in anything that remotely indicates that you have any money? Why aren't you investing in my company if you say you're rich? You see these things all the time. If you don't like culture, the culture that we're in today, let's just pick out movies and music. You don't like any of the writing of either. The music is a bunch of rehashed, horribly rehashed, simplified versions of the masters way back in the day. Movies, well, again, cliche buckets. Nothing creative. There's no twists, there's no turns, you never have to think. It's very obvious in the first act who the bad person is, who the good person is. You know the good person's always going to win because they always do. And you're like sitting in there going, geez, I used to really like going to movies, but movies suck today. But you're sitting at home and you don't make movies, you don't make music, you never will. And you're like, God damn it. Why does this all suck? And I send you a plane ticket to come to Los Angeles, and you're going to meet with all the top executives that run record companies and movie companies, studios, right? And you land here in Los Angeles, and I give you a bracelet with a little piece of equipment on it. And you say, what's this? I say, that's our invisible cloak device. Go ahead and put it on. Hop in the limo. We drive to whatever studio you want to go to. Before we get out, I say, push that red button. Tink. I push mine. Bink. Can you see me? Yeah. Chauffeur, can you see us? No, sir. All right. Please come around and open the door for us. He opens the door. We walk out. We're completely invisible. And I happen to know that today is a big meeting to greenlight a bunch of films, to evaluate some films already in the queue, and we sneak onto the set. Or not even the set. We sneak into the executive rooms and we sit in one of the chairs or sit on the banisters or whatever, and we listen. And here's where you get to see the problem that relates directly to blind obedience. Probably better described as the blind leading the blind in some cases, right? You hear a marketing department telling the executives what people want to see. You hear all these lowbrow cliches and formulas that determine the bottom line. Well, we find them, we put a lot of special effects in there, and then when we promote it this much, we're always making back this much money. It's just a game. It's just a game of promotion and special effects. And someone in the room has got a brain. They're kind of like us, and they're like, but the story is so bad. It could be so much better. Just give me a month or two with some rewriters, and we'll get this thing to be a lot better. And everyone else looks at everyone else in the room and they say, But why? Why spend that extra money to make it a little bit better when all we're doing is churning out shit and making a profit from it? That's all the world is profit, profit, profit. Art, that died when UA died, right? When United Artists died, any competition of quality died with them. And other little studios like that cared. All the famous actors are old. They just want to make sure they don't die broke, so they don't care either. And the sad thing is that you're seeing the blind lead the blind within this room, within this meeting that I've taken you to, but you know that the people that are going to buy the ticket, they're even more blind. And that's why culture suffers the second that we stick our head in a hole and just hope that things get better. I know I'm preaching to the choir, trust me. But it's one of these things where if you wake up and you're like, I'm awake, I want to make a difference in this world, you're kind of going, well, shit. What's the most effective way I can do it for myself and help bring people to awareness of this whole thing? This is one of the ways you can do it. I went to a trade show in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and the funny thing was that open door thing happened because there's a bunch of, every trade show, it's at a convention, and there's usually like hall number 1, hall number 2, and, we're moving from place to place. And this is an industry trade show, meaning brilliant people who know everything about broadcasting, everything about filmmaking, operating cameras. There's genius hardware people, genius software people everywhere. But they still couldn't realize there's two halves to a door. And when it came to lunchtime, they're all piping through this one door that's open while the other door is completely unlocked. And that speaks to indoctrination, right? You're academically brilliant. You can memorize and repeat things. You can even execute very complex hardware and software tasks. But you can't think for yourself. The other one that always happens to me is when I walk into a restaurant. I haven't had this happen in a while, but when you have to wait to be seated. When you have a true maitre d', someone who understands. They look at you, they look at your attire, they look at who you're with your family. That's one place that they might seat you, but if you're with your girlfriend and she's dressed up and you're dressed up, they put you in a different place in the restaurant. They understand what's going on. And they're also looking at how much money you're probably going to spend with the group that you're bringing. The more money you're going to spend, the better they'll put you in the better place they'll put you in, right? One of the tricks if you're young, a little trick from your Uncle Deep Thoughts here, if you're in your young 20s, but you're very mature and you have a date that you'd like to impress, slip the dude a $20 bill and say, put us in the best place. If you're up in a big penthouse restaurant and there are seats against the window, give them $20 to $50. Trust me, it'll pay off in the end, and say, get me to one of the window seats. This is for you only if I can get a seat over there on the window and it's not reserved, right? They'll even yank reserve signs if you pay them enough, okay? But one of the things that happens with average mall installations, mall restaurants, is some blind obedient person who's maybe, young usually, but doesn't always happen this way. They will sit you in one of those stupidest places in the restaurant, right by the bathroom that has all those horrible chemicals coming out of it, right by the kitchen that's always going to have someone slamming the fucking door coming in and out. Exactly what you don't want to experience. What I do, and this is one thing I did with my daughter, I said, I'd tell her right before this person came up to me, I said, look, they're going to try to sit us in a really shitty spot. And watch how we handle this. And she'd look, here it comes, we get set in this horrible area. And as soon as they point at the table, my daughter's waiting, my girlfriend's behind me, and I said, I think we'd like to sit over there. And immediately they go, oh, okay. Boom, we go over and sit in a much better location. If they have any problem understanding it, I tell them, I don't want to listen to that door. I don't want to smell your urinal cakes in your bathroom here. I'm about to drop $100 on lunch. If you can't find a better place, then we're just going to take ourselves somewhere else, right? I never have to get to that level of being a dick. Clarifying my objective, right? They'll just sit you there. Because in their brain, they're not thinking. Sit people down, sit people down. That's all they think, right? Or sometimes they inconvenience you based on where the zones are for various waiters and waitresses, right? You sort that out. I'm not sorting that out. And then obviously tip your help if they take good care of you. How many times have you been in a restaurant when they bring you a completely burned meal? Half of that's sort of the help's fault for not looking at the meal and going, Jesus Christ, the kitchen completely destroyed this. And I'm supposed to hand it to a customer and get money for it, right? If you go buy a big steak or something. I haven't had this happen in a really long time. But I've even been with relatives, and they bring me a big burned steak or whatever, burned bread. That's one of the real classics, right? And I will wait till the waitress comes over, and I give a little bit of responsibility to the waitress or the waiter or whatever, but I'm pretty friendly with it. I just say, look, this is burned. Like, I don't eat burned food. I'm looking for food that's cooked, not burned, So please get this back and fix it up, And they always do. But I've had my relatives, feel very uneasy about that process. Oh, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Well, I'm not going to fucking pay, $30 for a steak and eat like a charquette, But it's interesting how there's resistance against thinking and getting what you really want in life sometimes. But you have to be that person. It educates everyone in the pipeline that this is unacceptable. You send back one burned piece of toast or one burned steak, and you've saved a bunch of people in the room from getting a burned steak or a burned piece of toast, thus making the world a better place. And this happens on all kinds of levels, right? There's a million examples, right? I'd love to hear some of your examples in the comments, to be honest. There's a million ways to make society a better place, right? A million ways. Hopefully some of these episodes will help you see a bunch of different perspectives of how to get that to happen. And some of you are going to be more equipped to take some of these formulas and correct them than other formulas, which is why I continue going and putting more and more in the library so that you can say, well, this book, I'm not really into that. Oh, this one's really cool. I can totally do that. And I know exactly what he's saying. I have it way worse than this dude, right? And just in closing, the other synonym for blind obedience might be habit. Some habits can be the difference between life and death, and they're good. And if you continue these habits, you'll stay healthy, you will stay lucid, you'll live a lot longer and happier, right? Part of the detoxification I'm always going on about allows you to be sentient in your body as your body is healthy to keep you alive. But the more you pollute your brain with things that destroy your brain, the big trend nowadays is that you are alive, but you're dead. And I've mentioned this a couple times in really old episodes, but I'm going to throw this back out there so you can kind of see how habits can give you a fortuitous life or one with a lot of despair. As the chainsaw goes off behind me. Fuck me. I'll see if I can't remove that in post. I once went to an old folks' home regularly in my late teens and took care of, I was assigned to one woman, but I ended up taking care of two. Actually ended up taking care of a lot of them because a lot of them thought I was their relative because they're suffering from massive dementia, massive Alzheimer's, and they just think I was their son. And they'd greet me, and I would just turn into their son immediately. I'd play piano for them forever, talk to them, whatever. It was a lot of fun. And in the room that I was assigned to, a 93-year-old woman, and ended up finding a room with 3 women in it. I had a 93-year-old, I believe an 86-year-old, and a 74-year-old. And when you talk about blind obedience when it comes to health, because we all were lied to about, the safety of saccharin and margarine and microwaves and all this other stuff that creates all kinds of poisons for us, among other things, the 93-year-old was completely mobile. She could dress herself every single day. Never had any dementia, never had any Alzheimer's. She remembered everything that happened from previous visits. Never thought I was her son. The 86-year-old was of the same mental capacity, but she had lost the ability to walk for whatever reason. I didn't really ask him about her. I didn't ask her about her issues physically. But the 74-year-old would lay on the bed, and it was literally like the first bed was a 93-year-old, the second one was an 86-year-old, and the third one was a 74-year-old. The 74-year-old was this really beautiful old woman, and they always took really good care of her. I mean, this place was phenomenal. Her hair always looked fantastic. She always had makeup and lipstick on, which was very bright red, and a beautiful dress. But every time I saw her, she was lying on the bed. And in all my visits, which were probably at least a dozen or two, she never spoke. She never got up. She never walked around. And if you think about it, each generation 10 years down, so the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s, because the woman on the left, the far left, was 19 years younger than the one that was fully mobile and conscious. They had different eating habits. They had different life habits. They had different educational regimens because of their different ages. The younger that these girls got, the more they became indolent. All three women are surely gone by now, because that was 30 years ago. So give that some thought. What generation are you in? Hopefully we can come back to the 93-year-old by detoxing, by thinking, right? I know you feel me. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. There's audio, video. There's even audio of a chainsaw. There's a locked Facebook group and Patreon. So take care of yourself, think for yourself, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.